Please rise for your pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening. Welcome to the April 14th Planning Board meeting, Town of Carmel. First on the agenda is Shallow Stream Properties, 145, 153 Shindigan Hill Road, for a public hearing. Mike, did you have any comments?
I do not. All my comments were addressed. It's not for public hearing.
And Rich?
All comments addressed?
And Mr. Cleary?
All planning issues have been addressed, and they obtained the variance for the lot area, percentage of the lot change.
Is there anyone in the audience like to be heard on this agenda item?
Mr. Chairman, being there's no public comment, I'd like to motion to close the public hearing.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
And Pat, you'll prepare a resolution, please? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. Next on the agenda is Dynamic Properties Corp., 70 Glenita Avenue. Mike?
Applicant proposes to convert the second floor of a two-story commercial structure into two one-bedroom apartments. A use variance is required from the ZBA for the mixed-use structure. We're doing the master plan as we speak, and that will be permitted, as you know. But at the moment, they still need the use variance. Provide floor plans of each floor in the front building and the shed. I only received plans for the second floor. Without this information, I cannot recommend referral to the ZBA. Variance numbers might change. I don't know exactly what's there yet. There is no on-site parking on this property, just to be clear. Does the applicant propose to add sprinklers to the building? May be required depending on the building type and the use of the building. What's the size and use of the shed? Nothing was added to the parking calculation for the shed. What is the 7x11 structure at the rear of the main building? Could be an entryway, I don't know, it wasn't clear on, I don't have the first floor. Is there a trash enclosure or dumpster on the site? And variances are required for lot area, lot width, lot depth, front yard, side yard, rear yard, minimum floor area, coverage, parking, loading, and that's it.
Mike, thanks. Rich?
So as Mike mentioned, this is existing commercial property, a second floor into two single-bedroom apartments. Applicant will need to provide a water and wastewater report for the site. Additional information must be provided regarding the parking area / agreement in the rear of the property. There are no real site improvements being made for this project, and therefore there are no additional comments by the engineering department.
Thank you, Rich. And Pat?
So nothing really significant to add, Mr. Chairman, but I think this is probably the fourth conversion of second-floor office or commercial space to residential space. So as Mike indicated, the comprehensive plan consultants are incorporating that, but it would be useful to reinforce the necessity of doing that to that group, just so they hear it again from you, because, again, we're seeing these all the time. This is, I think, a particularly appropriate location for this type of a conversion, but as it stands today, use variance and those area variances that Mike indicated, those are pre-existing conditions that are on the site. Nothing's being built to modify that. This is a historic, an older building that predates the existing zoning. That's why those variances are required. The one issue Mike raised is parking. So there is no parking on the site, but the site's right behind it is a very large parking lot. Whether or not we choose to require them to provide some legal mechanism to provide parking on there or not, I don't know that it's really necessary, because that parking lot is fairly underutilized. There's plenty of parking there. So again, that's likely where the folks who live in these apartments would park their cars, but
Is that a public?
it's not a public parking
Do we know
lot.
who owns that parking lot?
I do. One co-plaza.
Yeah, so it's part of that commercial stretch. I think it's used by the church on Sundays. It gets lots of shared use informally. So I don't think the two dwellings here sharing a couple of parking spaces there is a big issue. But I'll leave it to Joe to determine if we need a formal agreement to adopt.
We do at the zoning board. It's a condition of the approval for off-site parking. it has to be. They're gonna have to give them a legally binding perpetual agreement. It's all written in the code that way.
But again, there's plenty of parking there, so it's not a real issue. And Mike mentioned that dumpsters, refuse, that sort of thing needs to be shown where people, now that there's a residential use, we need to know about that.
Pat, I think you cleared up a question that rose in my mind when I was listening. Is this considered existing non-conforming? It is.
So,
No,
the
or-
residential use?
No, the way it sits right now, is it non-conforming?
Structurally, the building is, but the residential use is not. That's a brand-new use.
Which would require all those variances.
Yep.
And you heard it mentioned here tonight, both Rich, Mike, and I are on a team looking at all these codes, and we do like the idea, I think it's a benefit of town to have commercial downstairs, residential upstairs, not vice versa, commercial downstairs. And this area seems to fit well, there's three homes, one after the other, which I think it works well there. But Paul, I think we need to know more, and I will take the message forward, we'll take the message forward.
Yeah, I'll respond to Mike's comments and give him,
So you
get
have a
all that
one-bedroom
information.
apartment up, two one-bedroom apartments, call it 4 people for,
Mm-hmm.
you have people downstairs.
Yes, there's a-
Attorney's office, I believe,
accountant,
accountant,
accountant.
a couple people there, so you have 6, 7 people at any given time. Where will these people park? The road's too narrow, right? You can't park on that road, I don't think.
No, the parking lot behind them is privately owned, and what normally takes place is the businesses enter into an agreement to rent, in essence, a number of spaces from that property owner.
So,
We'll need that.
so Joe, following up on Mike, Rich's, Pat's point, what's your thoughts on a legally binding agreement?
The agreement is required the agreement is required per our code.
Okay.
So that'll have to be prepared and submitted, either myself or at the ZBA, Greg Fulchetti will look at it.
Okay.
Any questions from the board? Now, Joe, can we, I really don't want this coming in front of the ZBA with a letter, without a letter, right? I mean, we
Without
Paul should bring a letter.
Without the
to
proposed agreement. Yeah, the
Yes.
code requires it, so it should be submitted as part of the package.
Conceivably, the owner of the parking lot could say no, so
So, you know,
there has to be some preliminary.
I personally am okay sending it to the ZBA, only contingent upon you having an agreement for parking.
Well, I
ready
think,
yet.
Michael, I need to answer,
Yeah, it's not
Mike.
ready yet to go to ZBA.
Right.
I think
Yeah.
They have a few other things they have to answer too. There's the first floor, we don't have the full floor plan, so we don't know he says the square footage is this, but I like to check it.
Okay.
so
And the
we'll
shed.
do that, and then we'll come back.
You're probably 2 meetings away
Yeah.
then, if you
That's
can get
fine.
everything you need.
Yeah. it'd
We
be-
like the
it'd be
idea,
quick.
but we need to do it right.
No, that's fine.
Everybody in agreement with that? John? Yes, sir. Right?
Yep.
I agree.
Anthony?
All right, thank you.
Okay. Thanks, folks. So I'm going to change the agenda around a little bit. Zach is here to discuss Platinum Propane, and you're also here for the Union Valley Cemetery, which is 8th on the agenda. So after you do Platinum Propane, I think we should hear Union Valley Cemetery also. Next on the agenda is Platinum Propane, 1035 Route 6 for a site plan. Mike, I believe you had some comments.
Yeah, the applicant proposes to convert a dwelling to an office, remove a garage, add a 1,500 square foot lean-to for propane tank storage, and add a filling station for the property on Route 6 in Mayapack. Will this be a terminal? Does the NFPA allow burying a 30,000-gallon tank? Provide details and information on these tanks. Why does the parking calculation provide for 1,650 square feet and the zoning table only 1,600 square feet? Just clear up whichever one it is.
Sure.
Provide floor plans of each floor in the front building, filling station, and the lean-to. Variances are required from the ZBA for front yard, minimum floor area, loading space, and you could put one on the properties. You
Yeah,
should just
absolutely,
show
yeah.
one.
We'll
I mean, it's
absolutely show
easier
one.
than getting the variance, so.
Yep.
That was it.
I believe it's two 30,000-gallon tanks, right?
Yeah, but do they allow the burying of a 30, of
Yeah.
any of them, one or two?
Thanks. Rich?
So as Mike mentioned, the application encompasses a proposal to convert an existing residence into office space for a propane business. The project will develop 1.3 acres of a 12-acre parcel located at 1035 Route 6. Referrals would be needed Putnam County Department of Health, Mahopac Fire Department, Town Environmental Conservation Board, New York State DOT. Permits from the DOT for, depending on improvements to the ingress and egress along Route 6. Putnam County Health for water and subsurface septic. Again, state DOT within the right-of-way. New York State DEC coverage under the general permit for stormwater, and ECB for potential work within the buffer. There is work being done in the buffer, and possibly the New York City DEP. The area of disturbance is 1.3 acres, which exceeds the threshold criteria for disturbances for regulation of over an acre. It will need to provide permanent stormwater controls for the various pieces of the puzzle that the state requires. Consideration should be considered for access for fire department around the rear of the building. Traffic control and vehicle movement plans should be provided. Site distance calculations, driveway profiles, slope distances, traffic study at the site should be performed. This is similar to the propane and fueling that is going to be right across the street on the Cole Way or a couple of properties down. The applicant may be required to supply a stormwater maintenance agreement, and should any public improvements be deemed necessary, they will need to provide a performance bond, associated engineering fee. I have about 16 other more detailed comments. We'll provide the applicant with those comments.
Thanks, Rich. Pat?
So there are a number of site plan issues, but the fundamental issue here is what type of facility is this? So underneath that question is the fact that, as I think you know, there's a gas moratorium in Westchester County by Con Ed. That's potentially being lifted soon. So is this a temporary facility to serve our southern neighbors, or is this a facility like the one we viewed on Nicole Way, which was more of a permanent, long-term facility serving our community? So, and Mike's raised the point, is this a terminal? So is this 12 large tankers leaving in the morning, filling up places elsewhere? Or is this where I go on Saturday to fill up my tank for my barbecue? That's sort of the underlying premise of what it is, and is it one of those two things? So we need to get a handle on that. That would influence a lot of the site planning issues that Rich and Mike have talked about. So the radius of the curb and the layout of the parking areas means, am I driving in there, or are professional propane truck drivers driving through the site? So all of that relates to what it's all about. So that's really the primary issue. I've got lots of minor technical comments about landscaping and screening. DOT's involved in this because they're proposing a new curb cut onto the main road. That right-of-way is a little funky. There's a lot of stuff there. There's impediments, so there might be site distance issues which would affect the location of the driveway and so forth. So there's a lot of technical issues, but I think the fundamental question is, what's this all about?
Thanks, Pat. So Zach, before I open up to the board, why don't you tell us about the business?
Yeah, so it's more of the second thing that Pat said. They're a propane business. They've got the smaller trucks, right? They go and fill homes. Just so there'd be a large tanker truck that could come in and fill the two tanks. And then that lean-to is actually for them to back the trucks underneath. So they have their standard, your standard propane truck, like the smaller one, like a Triax dump truck.
Like residential propane
Yeah,
delivery?
residential propane, yeah.
And would it be retail also to the, like Pat mentioned? about
Yeah,
fill-up?
it's wholesale, they're gonna wholesale and sell as well. Yep. So not retail? No.
I couldn't go there with my tank on Saturday and fill it up for my propane.
I'll confirm with them. They
Just
may,
check on
they
that,
may
because
offer that.
That's
Yeah.
what they're asking about, is the parking, who's gonna be driving in there,
Right.
who's gonna be pulling out
Yeah,
there.
so the loop is for, their propane trucks to come in, they drive underneath the canopy, they can fill their propane tanks, out of the weather, and then they go and make their runs for the day. When they're done, they come back, they park under the lean-to, so that it's shielded from Route 6,
My understanding was they're gonna fill up we'll say Rhino, and I don't mean to say whatever
Sure.
that company is, where they put those tanks in a place, and then you can go trade your tank in and take a full one. That's my understanding. They're gonna do that too, but again, that's not retail on site. That would be wholesale, because they're doing it there and
And
then
that-
delivering it somewhere else
Yeah.
for resale.
So
But
there'd be one-
that morphs into retail. So all of a sudden now they're selling barbecues and they're selling the steel brushes to clean the crap off your grill after you leave it on
You
there
bring
too
your
long.
tank
They're
in,
not
you
doing it
take
there, though.
So-
They're gonna
Yeah.
deliver it.
So he's supposed to answer that question.
Yeah, they're not doing any of that there.
Thank
This
you.
is- Yeah.
So this will be
I spoke to them.
you can possibly get your propane tank, your barbecue grill filled up there?
No, they
Okay.
would be, they would be filling the tanks there, and then they would be taking them to gas station or whatever
Oh,
to
okay.
switch them out with,
Okay.
right?
And then you'd be delivering propane to homes
Homes,
with
exactly.
generators, homes with heating systems?
Yep.
What about repair?
Repair of,
Heating,
Service.
Generators.
oh, I don't think I don't think they do any of that stuff. It's just strictly delivery.
You know how many trucks we're talking about?
I think, I'll get back to you for sure, but I think that's either 3 or 4 inside, underneath that lean-to.
Because if I understand correctly, we're talking about two different types of truck. One type of truck that would deliver the
Yeah, like
tanks.
your large, when you see a gas station fill up the large tanker truck, that would come in and fill the buried tanks. And then the smaller standard home delivery fueling truck, that would be that would be their propane delivery truck.
Right, but then we'd also have another truck that would deliver the tanks, you were saying, to
the gas
gas
station?
stations.
Oh, yeah, I probably, I don't know how they would do that, but I can get an answer for you.
You probably should have next meeting you come back, maybe have the owner.
Yeah.
Come in and answer some
Sure.
questions.
What about Mike's question about, I assume it's okay to deliver, to bury
It is.
propane tanks
Yeah,
there?
we've been dealing with Platinum, and they gave us all the background on NFPA. So you can bury them, there's distances, right? There's prescriptive distances to the property lines, prescriptive distances to buildings. I believe, off the top of my head, I believe it's 50 feet, and I think the nearest tank is 67 feet. Closest tank is 67 feet to the northern property line.
And Zach, who permits that? That's a DEC permit that they obtain for the burying of
I
the
believe
tanks?
so, yeah,
Can
Platinum
you
would-
share some of that criteria?
Sure.
So that you've got a wetland on the property, is that a factor in the location of the tanks? I'd like to know what the DEC
Sure.
looks at.
And also, if you could, when you come back, if you could tell us about the safety features of the tanks and where they pump it in. I mean, I'm sure there's redundancies
Oh, yeah.
there.
Yeah.
I mean, if you could just explain to us those safety procedures, I think it'd be a big help.
Absolutely.
And Ray, Rich indicated this has got to go to the fire department, so we certainly want to hear from the fire department.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think we also want a rendering of the property, right? We're gonna convert a dwelling to an office, we're gonna remove a garage, we're gonna add a 1,500 square foot lean-to. We're gonna have a filling station. This is right on Route 6, visible from Route 6. I'd like to at least see what it's gonna look like,
Sure.
the whole,
Yeah, I mean,
because it's gonna be visible from the road.
so we, with the screening that we're proposing, and I know we have comments to
Yeah.
address on that, the intent was to get the loop, further away. That existing house is right on 6. I mean,
Yeah.
it's within the front yard setback. So, we proposed the loop to be further back, and then that gives us the ability to screen what we can from the road. There's a lot of trees in front that
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
but we are
I
gonna,
saw you have something about evergreens in here, but let's take a look at what's gonna,
sure.
Mr. Chairman, it also is a 12-acre parcel, so can it be moved, right, to address your concern, to address your issue? If the screening's not enough, if it's not there, can it be moved to a different part of that property? Or is there another intention for the rest of that property in the future? Don't know, right? I mean,
and if you
that
move
doesn't-
it back, what about signage? What's the signage gonna be like? You wanna attract people in, you want people to know you're there, but we don't need a 20-foot neon sign, right?
Right.
And to that point too, Mr. Chairman, so are those trucks stored at this site as well?
They are under the lean-to structure.
So that may suggest,
That's-
to Rich's point, we may want to push it back a
Yeah.
little or screen it
Yeah.
if those are
So
visible.
topography-wise, it does kind of, after you get to the eastern side of that loop, it does kind of come up pretty quick. So, this loop is kind of in the flatter sections of the slope, but,
If you're looking at the property from the road, to the right, there's some residential homes, right? Are they that close there? When you get down closer to the car wash that way, there's,
they're far, yeah. So they're beyond where the wetland is shown on the map. I mean, they're
Okay.
further south than that.
Zach's got some work to do, but any comments from anyone else?
No, but I do think, I just wanted to point, they do have the church, which is pretty close. That's the one at that corner, remember we talked about with Nicole Way?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's pretty close.
So that would be on the left of the,
If you're standing in front of the
Right.
property, yeah,
Yeah.
you go off to the left. Yeah.
Right. Church is to the left. We have met with the DOT on site. There is an existing driveway there. The proposal is to just widen that to conform with the commercial entrance of the DOT. So we met them, looked at site distance both directions. you know, they determined that was the spot, right where it was kind of where it's
So
going to
you're
be.
not moving it, you're just making it wide?
Yeah, right, so it's, right now, it's a one, you know, it's a residential driveway, so it's 1 lane in. We're going to make it 2 lanes, so it's going to just widen out.
Gotcha.
Right, so the last application that was in front of us, there was a lot of gyrations with the state to figure out
Yeah.
trucks coming in and out, so that, you may want to go back to some of the minutes that were there, or some of the discussions that were had for the one on Nicole Way, the reason why that got moved off of Nicole Way, and then the reason why it wasn't moved closer, all was driven by what the DOT wanted, and it was kind of an arduous process to get there, so.
Okay.
Good point. The DOT met us there, and the line of sight wasn't good. Mike Simone from the Highway Department met us there.
Right, so we've been there and done that in this particular area, so you really, I know you said you spoke to the DOT.
Yep, we met him on site. Yep.
Right, so you know, site distances are gonna be huge for them, especially with the type of vehicles that are going in and out.
Okay.
Well, specifically, Rich is mentioning, when you come out, when you exit your property, trucks can make a left out of there. That's
Right.
where we're really concerned with the Nicole Way project. Because I think Route 6 is 55 miles an hour there, or 40, or whatever.
I think it's, I think it's 40 through there.
Okay.
And part of the concern we had was when your truck's pulling out loaded, I mean, it's not gonna move as quickly.
Sure.
So we were concerned about, you know, the potential for accidents, and, you know, it's a straightaway, and people do go fast there.
Yep. And there's a little bit of a bend in 6
Yeah.
as you go south, a little bit.
All right.
Okay.
Zach, you got a couple things?
I got homework.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Zach, are you doing DeMag and the Demi? Okay, so let's do this. Let's do Union Valley Cemetery, 730 Union Valley Road, regrading. Oh, is it? I didn't see that. Okay. Mike, I believe you had a comment on Union Valley Cemetery?
Yeah, I have a couple. The project received final approval September 25th of 19. The approval is good for 1 year. It has now expired, and they are here for reapproval. I have no objection to the reapproval. However, can you get the garbage cleaned up at looks like the area where they were going to start dumping? There's a bunch of garbage in there. Please get it done before we sign the map. It's something that really needs to be addressed. I got a few complaints from neighbors, and they said they drive by it 2-3 times a day, and they're getting a little aggravated. They thought it was going to be done, so.
Yep.
If we can get that done, after that's done, I'll sign off on the map, and then we can move you forward.
Rich?
As Mike said, this was previously approved, there's no objection to having it reapproved. Zach, did you submit a stormwater pollution prevention plan, and we got all that signed off? or
Yeah,
not?
they have permit coverage with the state
Yeah,
already.
so
They do.
So ignore that paragraph that's in their board. I apologize, it wasn't submitted as part of the application, so I assumed it wasn't there. That was the only thing I had out there, so they're good to go for reapproval from the engineering department's point of view.
And Pat, I don't believe you had any comments.
No objections to the reapproval.
Any comments from the board on regrading? Pat, as long as they satisfy the trash and Mike's comments, and I'll ask Pat to prepare a resolution for you,
Fantastic.
all right? Contingent upon you satisfy Mike's request.
Understood.
Thanks, Zach.
Thank you.
Okay, DeMag and Demi 552 Route 6, we're gonna hold over. We got an email this afternoon on that.
That's correct.
All right. Next on the agenda, number 5 on the agenda, Centennial Golf Course, 185 John Simpson Road, amended site plan. Mike, I believe you had some comments on Centennial.
Applicants propose to change the tee box and move the parking area over to land in southeast to make room for the townhouse development proposed at the corner of Fair Street and Simpson Road. The already submitted lot line adjustment must be approved. I just keep saying this to make sure that it happens in the right order. The lot line adjustment has to happen first. The required parking for the golf course is no longer in the town of Carmel. We, the town, have no control on the parking space size, number, or aisle width. Excuse me. A variance is required from the ZBA for non-compliance with section 150-something, 42A7. It says they have to have a legally binding perpetual agreement. It spells it all out so that they can get this variance. Is there a mechanism for the Town of Carmel Planning Board to now ask that the golf course have some sort of a deed restriction to allow it to only be open space or a golf course? The developer claimed they couldn't make money as a 27-hole golf course, that's why they were here. Now we're gonna keep the 27, nothing's changed there. There's nothing to stop this from continuing to be, let's do 9 less holes, 9 less holes, 9 less holes, and turn it into developments. I don't know if that's something that we can ask for or something that can be discussed.
Fair point. Thank you. Rich?
So, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is really a review of the seeker package that was provided to the department. The finding statement, the original finding statement from the original environmental impact statement regarding the development of a golf course and it was issued in 1996. There's an updated FEAF seeking approval of construction of a 63-unit townhome, increased from 52 units from the original submittal. I don't know when that got changed. But when it comes to the seeker, impacts on surface water, applicant indicates there are no new extensions of existing wastewater treatment facilities. However, they propose a new pump station for the site. This should be clarified. That would really be an extension of our sewers treatment facility. Wetlands, the applicant did not address the concerns of the planning board regarding the importance or lack of importance of the wetlands on the site. Stormwater, the applicant indicates the New York City DEP will review the stormwater management features. The applicant should note that the New York City DEP will need to approve that SWIP also. And in order to meet state and DEP criteria, extensive green infrastructure and runoff reduction is required. This information was not provided and will need to be provided as it may impact the size and nature of the proposed project. With regards to water and sewer, the applicant has indicated a new sewer pump station, which has not been approved, a new 8-inch water service line along Fair Street. This alignment has not been approved. As such, the applicant did not address the town engineer's concerns. Current water usage is shown as 132 gallons per day. However, the time frame for that is not provided and does not address all-time use or the use over a course of a year. Proposed water use is 20,790, so they're going from 132 gallons to 20,790. As part of the seeker, a water and wastewater report was not provided, reviewed, or approved. The report, once provided, should be reviewed by an independent consultant. Impacts on flooding, this comment should be clarified. For plants and animals, the Indiana and northern long-eared bats and bog turtles are in the vicinity of the project site. Additional information is required to show that the project does not impact these habitats. The findings report should be reviewed by an independent consultant. Tree cutting is proposed in the wetland buffer. They'll need permits for that. Open space and recreation, it's unclear how updating a parking area and installing townhomes is a benefit to open space and recreation. Impacts on transportation, as no drawings are provided, it is unclear if the units along Fair Street are still proposed. If so, the applicant did not address the planning board's concerns. The study will need to be reviewed by a traffic consultant. Consistency with the community plan, land use, it's unclear how updating a parking area and installing townhomes is desired to balance and protect natural resources. The project increases the impervious area on the site. The percent increase must be provided. Environmental protection, it's unclear how updating a parking area and installing townhomes preserves natural resources and protects drinking water supplies. Infrastructure, the relevance of paying capital costs for 25 years should be elaborated as the project did receive a benefit from these services, i.e. used water and sewer. It is unclear if the applicant has paid capital as if the property were fully developed as 63 townhomes. They also indicate as an economic generator, which touches on what Mike said. It cites that a 27-hole golf course is an economic generator. It also represented to us that the 27 golf course was losing money and townhomes would be needed to offset the loss. As such, the course was going to be converted into an 18-hole golf course. This should be clarified. That's what I have for you just on the seeker.
Thank you, Rich. And, as we go through this tonight, I understand there's going to be some overlap between the Centennial Golf Course, amended site plan, and Centennial Golf Townhomes, as well as probably the lot line adjustment. So it might mix a little bit throughout that, but we'll address each one of them.
So that's a good point, Mr. Chairman. So my comments really are lumping everything together. So you
Okay,
have the
there you
three
go.
applications,
Yep.
as you just described. What we are dealing with tonight really is seeker. We're at a fork in the road in making a determination on how we deal with seeker. So the applicants made their presentation to you, I think it was January, December, a few months ago. You saw the project, you raised a series of comments and concerns. The plans that have come back to you essentially remain fundamentally unchanged. It's very similar. So it appears as though the applicant's sticking, and that relates to our discussion about seeker. So the material that was submitted, Rich gave you a litany of some of the things that were inadequate with that material. The response followed the format we asked them to follow. Look at the findings that were adopted 20 years ago or whatever it is and compare and contrast. The response, however, was generalized. We would have expected it to be a little more detailed, so we'd be happy to sit with the applicant and describe what needs to be fleshed out with respect to those analyses. But that sort of falls into the wheelhouse of the conversation you need as a lead agency to have this evening, which is you've given the applicant some direction, they've responded. You've heard tonight that the response didn't quite address all those issues. You can choose to control that process entirely by moving down the route of an environmental impact statement. That requires the applicant to do the same thing that was done when Centennial came before you 20 years ago, the full EIS public hearings. It's a rigorous process. But what it also does is it requires the applicant to address alternatives, some of the things that you discussed with the applicant at the prior meeting. What if you moved the townhomes? What if you did alternative internal circulations? The applicant has chosen not to modify the plan, but you can control that through an EIS. So tonight's decision really is, do we go in that route, or do we give the opportunity to the applicant to further refine and respond to our comments and work with us to respond to those issues? So of all the issues that are before you tonight, it's really, we're at the fork in the road, and which route are you going to choose to take to address your seeker role as lead agency?
Thank you, thank you. Before I turn it over to you, in preparing for this meeting, I'm looking at the data, it's 26 years old. So why would we use any data that's 26 years old? And I'll give you an opportunity to talk about that, but so much change has happened since this last review, the secret review you had in 1996, I believe it was in. So try to cover that in your opening if you can.
Sure. First of all, thank you for the comments. And for the record, my name's Richard O'Rourke. I'm with the law firm of Keenan, Bean, PC, representing the applicants. Here tonight on behalf of the applicants, David Leibowitz from Centennial with Larry Boudreau. And then we have with us on behalf of Toll Brothers, we have Kelvin Moses, who's the entitlement program manager for Toll Brothers. Also this evening, and hopefully some of the questions can be answered by some of our consultants that are here. Chris Porter is here, along with his colleague Stacy Kurian, who's also a professional engineer and is a project engineer on this project. We also have here Victoria Storrs from Storrs Associates, who prepared the fiscal analysis that was part and parcel of the application. There might be some confusion because, quite frankly, when I looked at the agenda and the backup material that was posted, certain documents were omitted, and I'm just a little bit concerned, and perhaps Chris can address that, because I think some of the materials, I hope that, I thought addressed some of those points, but they were not necessarily in the backup materials that was circulated as part of the agenda. So we'll address that issue.
So,
Yes.
Rick, give us a list of what you thought we should have had.
Chris
and
will-
we'll verify that.
Yeah,
tomorrow,
Chris can,
or
we can
Monday.
talk about that. And one of the issues dates in terms of a comment that you made, Pat, which, and I hope you saw it, there was, you asked for a comparative analysis of the 1996 environmental review as well as with this particular application. And what we did is, I thought, we answered point by point, and I don't know whether you saw that.
Yes, we did.
You got that,
And
okay,
the
all right.
response was, the responses were generalized, so we need a little more detail with respect to how those are responded to.
Right.
So, for example, no change. We need to see the metric behind no change to understand that that is in fact no change.
Okay, all
We're not
right.
taking your word for it, we gotta see the proof.
Right.
You gotta
All
show
right.
your work.
Yeah, well, obviously, you know, that where we're proposing this development is area that's already disturbed because it's been a parking lot and, you know, there's no further blasting or anything like that, so,
Again, got it,
Right.
but show your work. There's no
Okay,
taking,
all right.
you know, your word for it, we gotta see it.
all right, so with that, why don't I turn it over to Chris so that he can take you through the presentation in terms of what we've done and what we thought were responsive comments to the comments that we had received previously, so, Chris? Oops, excuse me.
Hello, everyone. Chris Laporta with Pass Row Associates. We submitted a large package that I think, you know, I'll just give you a list of everything, Patrick, or it should also be on the transmittal that was attached to the package as well, and we could go through and just make sure that everything was reviewed. It sounds like you did read the SECR, the 1996 SECR comparison, and we can, you know, certainly beef up any areas that you want us to put more meat on the bone. Like, for example, we were just talking about rock blasting. Yes, there will be some earthwork on this project, but, you know, through our work with the New York City DEP and doing the stormwater testing, we've had excavators out there, and we, you know, have deep test logs that we know there's not going to be any rock encountered. So, you know, we could provide that type of
So Chris, great
information.
example. So the fact that you know that and you have that information, useful, we didn't. So that's my only,
And probably we should have been made aware that those tests were being done, so we could have been there to witness them or be part of that, because if you've done them with the DEP recently, have you done them recently, or is it 1996?
Recently.
Okay, so again, we need to be aware of that in the town, so we're witnessing them too. It's not just the DEP who's the stormwater, we're the MS4 here. So we are in charge of that also. The DEP has a hand in this, but the town has control of it also. Not control, but the town has oversight over it. That's the wrong word, right? So you know, we're the MS4. So if you're dealing with the DEP and you're doing deep hole tests for where stormwater is gonna be, we should have been there for it, just in general.
Okay. Well, you know, moving forward, if we do any more, the infiltration testing, we're not going to be proposing infiltration practices, so, but I could certainly share our test pit logs and the photographs of the deep tests that we did to, you know, demonstrate that there was no rock encountered.
And correspondence with the DEP saying that they approved it or they agreed with it, right? Have they done that yet?
Well, we haven't submitted a SWIP. They won't review an application until we're through SECR.
Correct.
But we've been having kind of working meetings with them, and we're heading in, I think, the right direction with them. We have been working on the practices that they want to see since we're in the wetland buffer. Obviously, we're proposing a stormwater wetland as our stormwater practice, which we see as a great improvement to the character of a wetland buffer. From right now, it's a manicured golf course practice area. It'll turn into a stormwater wetland, almost an extension of the existing wetland, except that they won't be connected besides through the overflow weir.
so Mr. Chair, I'm sorry to interrupt, Chris, that was a great illustration of the issue that you are wrestling with. So you just heard, we can't go to DEP because SECR's not complete. We can't complete SECR until we know that sort of information. So remember, on top of all of this is you as the lead agency. So that's, again, what I'm trying to emphasize this
Yep.
evening. That's, you've
Very
got to,
fair- very fair point.
you've got to be comfortable with this.
So what we could do is, as we keep moving our stormwater design, because we're not just like waiting to do the SWIP. The practices we're showing, we have a high level of confidence now that they're going to be, generally what the DEP will accept. But, maybe we could, in our next meeting, invite the town engineer and just, try to get to a level of comfort that, these practices, that we're not just throwing them on, the DEP has seen them, and then, we'll have some level of coordination and collaboration.
That's fine. Who are you working with the DEP on this?
Jason Capolo.
Okay, I'd work with Jason. Yeah, I mean, it's got to meet state criteria too, so you're not just looking at DEP criteria, right? You're looking at state criteria with it also, so you got to have that balance in there.
Correct.
So the DEP is not the only agency you're reporting to on this, though they will need to approve it.
That is correct, and we are learning that generally, they follow DEC and just have, go above and beyond the typical requirements, but we will be compliant with all regulatory agencies. So we also did have a joint meeting with the DEC and DEP, and I mentioned it in our response letter, but I guess I could elaborate a little bit further and explain. We showed them the alternative that you had brought up, Patrick, to try and connect the Fair Street townhome units to the rest of the development, and we showed them the current plan and what we think it would look like if we got rid of the curb cuts and made the connection. And they considered, they looked at what the alternative and said, well, this is going to cause wetland disturbance. When you're going to cause direct wetland disturbance, we require an alternative analysis. And they said there at the meeting that, in our opinion, your current plan would be our alternative analysis and the preferred plan. And that was concurred upon by the New York City DEP as well. They told us that it's a Class 2 wetland and that direct disturbance to Class 2 wetlands is something that is very, very rarely permitted.
So that's useful information. It would have been nice for us to be there as well, so that they heard our side of that conversation. So you were clearly advocating for your plan. We didn't have a chance to advocate on behalf of the planning board's comments, but that may be the absolute conclusion that would come out of that nevertheless. So again, it's closing that loop, making sure we're involved in that conversation and get that information directly from those agencies.
We could have a follow-up. That meeting we had been requesting it for a long time, and it came up on very short notice, but we certainly presented both alternatives as equals, and we didn't present it biased in one way or
Chris,
the other.
I'm not trying I'm not suggesting you're not doing anything appropriately at all. I'm simply suggesting this so the board hears this conversation and can understand, do we continue down that route? Or do we say, time out, we're going down a full EIS route, which would change tactics and strategies right now?
So we are trying to provide, an update. That's why we're here tonight, is to kind of give the status update on what our correspondence with the DEP and the DEC.
Sorry to interrupt.
The plans, they're still similar. We've just added some detail to them, and we'll continue to do so. We wanted to get an engineering report in front of you to start reviewing it. So we've been putting together the documents just in hopes that we'll receive more comments and we can put more meat on the bone to satisfy all of that, because we think that, we are working in a disturbed area and that we're not creating any significant environmental impacts with this project. And I think, we also have already requested to have another meeting with the town's engineering consultants on this coming Monday too, where we can really get into the details, because, Richard, I couldn't remember to go point by point on all of those things that you just brought up, but I think if we sat down in a working session, we could go through those. And, now that we have the materials and presented in the format that you'd like to see it, I think we could go through, item by item now and say, well, what's missing, what's, still a concern to the town, and we can get that level of detail added to these documents.
Right, Rose mentioned that there might be a meeting on Monday. I'm not available at all next week. I'm off on Monday, and then I'm booked for the rest of the week. So probably the week after for me. I'm just letting the board know that. Of course, you can meet with Pat and Mike, talk about those things, and we can have another meeting at another time. I apologize for that, but I'm just not in the office. I'm not going to be here, so.
That's okay. We're happy to have.
I'm letting you guys know as the applicant that I'm just not here, right? So it is.
So, I think it's sort of like the message goes from one person to another. I think it's best if we perhaps not have a meeting next week. We wait until you come back. And then this way we can answer all of the questions at one time and everybody hears what those responses are. So whatever your schedule is, obviously we'll accommodate it. Everybody
I
needs a
appreciate that,
vacation.
and I will work with your schedules also. So
Yeah,
I'm just
sure.
letting you know next week is tough.
Right.
I'd also like to hear more about water, right? We had 27 holes going down to 18 holes. All right, so then you say, well, reduction in water there, a lot of irrigation on a golf course. And you're gonna build 63 townhomes, so maybe it's, I don't know, plus or minus 20%. I don't really know what the numbers would be. But now we're gonna have 27 holes and 63 units. we need to see a water analysis. In addition to it, we've had 2 projects, the Hamlet of Carmel and Gateway and Fairways have been approved, and we need to make sure our water district can handle it, and we'd like to see a study on that also.
We did provide an engineering report that has a WaterCAD model, and we'd be happy to work with Richard and make sure it's calibrated if there's anything missing and get that tuned up.
Right.
But the irrigation is, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Larry.
Well,
The results were that there was adequate fire flow and water to support our project.
Right, so I did not provide comments to it, but I did a peripheral review of the wastewater report, and I do have comments and issues with it. The capacity of our plant is not 2 million gallons per day. That's the big aha that came out of it. So we don't have 2 million gallons per day coming through that plant. I think the highest it could be rated, and that's on a peak, is 1.5. I know we've probably exceeded it occasionally, but I think the equipment itself cannot go beyond 1 million gallons per day, 1.5 million gallons per day. It's designed for 1 million gallons per day. So, again, that's a big issue that needs to be talked about, because your report had 2 million gallons and a lot of excess capacity, and I haven't had a chance to just wrap my head around it, and we have an engineering firm that we used on a couple of projects already that has a model of a system that we can put that in there, understand how this is going to impact it, but that would have to be something that would go to escrow, that the applicant would have to pay for, and we would work together with that to figure that out. But my peripheral review of what you provided me, there's some inherent questions to it, so.
I'm not sure where we pulled that number. It must have been off of some public document that we found, but obviously anything coming straight from you would be more accurate.
Right, so
if
again,
there's-
and that's part of it, you pulled it off of our annual water quality reports, no information was asked for from the town, you kind of just, threw information out there, which is fine, I mean, you pulled out public information. We have actual hard data, we have actual models, we can work with you on that, but I mean, that's, again, going to Pat's point on what the board maybe need to move forward with, so.
Before you, Rich, currently, where do they get water from?
They get water from Carmel Water too, but they were only doing it for the clubhouse, right? They don't irrigate with it, and they're not going to irrigate with it in the future.
Okay.
Is that correct? They don't irrigate now, and there's absolutely no way they'll be irrigating with it in the future. Right,
What
so
about the townhomes?
townhomes are becoming, if once approved, it will, get from Carmel Water District 2.
Irrigation?
Well, no, there'll be no irrigation at all. It's
Okay.
so.
If there's any irrigation, it would be drawn from a pond. It wouldn't be coming from the town of Carmel.
No irrigation from the public water supply.
When you say irrigation, you're talking about the golf course, not.
I'm talking about the homes too. There will be no underground pipes that water trees or plants. That design, when you come forward, so when you plant a tree in front of that house, it's not gonna be watered by town water. Yeah, or you plant, you get it from the golf course's irrigation, and/or you plant native species that are able to be drought tolerant in this region. So, I mean, there's a million different ways we can do that, and you can bring it up to a very nice project where it has that kind of stuff, but no irrigation from the water supply.
Right.
No, I just, I mean, and what is your impression? I mean, can Carmel Water District 2 support the new townhouses?
That still needs to be, that's still being investigated. I'd have to go back to our model with our engineering firm to get there for it.
Okay, yeah, so we need to
Rich is
find
saying
that out.
1.5 at a peak, and they were under the.
Well, their
assumption of 2
number
million
came in at
gallons.
2, so I mean, but I'd have to go back and just double check. We also have to account for any of the undeveloped properties within the town of Carmel. You guys are in the town of Carmel, you're in the water district. I'm not denying any of that factual information, right? But there are other properties that are not, right? So, that are not utilizing water and sewer in the town of Carmel. So, that all has to get weighed in there too, because they, similarly to the applicant, have been paying capital and charges ad infinitum, so.
And all of that was based on known uses. So this is a changing use. That's what makes this complicated. It was calculated as a golf course. Now it's going to be a residential development. It's simply different. Whether the capacity is there to be determined.
I have a question, which is really gonna take us back. First time that this project came before us, it was kind of presented in a hardship about operating costs for the golf course, going from 27 holes down to 18 holes. You're back to 27 holes, correct? Okay, can you take us through the history of this? And also, do you have everything that we're talking about, the lot line adjustments, the townhomes, can we see that on one plan? Sure. Because I think it would make it clearer to see everything that we're talking about here. So if you could just take us back through this again, because.
Sure. So when we first were in front of you, it was, I think, 2018, 2019. Each year, revenue going down, expenses going up. The one thing in the world that COVID was great for was the golf business. As a result of COVID, hundreds of thousands of new golfers have come in, record rounds throughout the country, clubs filling up. He said, last year, we did 37,000 rounds. I think we barely did 30,000 pre-COVID. Right, so we now have the demand to justify the 27 holes. Where we were with you 2-3 years ago, we didn't.
So
Okay.
then there's a potential 5 years down the line, or during a recession, if there's a recession, that you might be back selling 9 holes and building more townhomes.
Well, we also talked about a forever green space back then, which I'd like to have that.
the cluster.
you know. Right, so I would like to, that could be a contingency to making this recession, as far as a recession coming forth, is maybe seeing a dedicated green space that in the event this won't be developed. Because that was very appealing to the board when you offered that. I thought it was a good aspect.
Yeah, and it was a requirement of the cluster.
If I may, and I heard Mike's comment about, in perpetuity, could this be a golf course? To be candid with you, I'm not aware of any property owner that's going to say in perpetuity, I'm going to guarantee you a golf course. And I don't think this property owner is going to do that either. So, I understand and I respect the thought, but, as a practical matter, things do change. And I wish I had known and invested in mask making 3 years ago. So I can't, we can't project that. So, with all due respect. And we did that application simply because that was prior to the ruling that was made by the Zoning Board of Appeals that permits, as of right, what we're proposing. So that's why we changed the way we did, so.
And Rick, I think part of this, the whole conversation, to Anthony's point, goes to the underlying economic premise of all of this. So is this a COVID blip, or is it the reality? It's now going to be 37,000 rounds every year moving forward, who knows? So part of, God willing, right?
Not got one, but I mean, so far, we're just.
Microphone, microphone.
You're gonna need the microphone because people don't see
I
them.
mean, the golf season is starting, but in the, in the parts of the countries that have played through the winter, the trends have continued and moved on. And if you talk to the golf companies and their equipment sales, the trends are continuing to move on.
So trends,
There's also,
Peter-
we also did not have a great weather year last year,
Yeah,
this year. And we also, if you look at it, 3 years ago, you could walk in, join any country of Westchester County. Now everything is sold out and has a waiting list. And there's a lot of, the other thing that COVID did is it brought people moving from the city, the trend from people, everyone wanted to move in the city, then all of a sudden COVID comes, and now everyone wants to get out of the city. So now you have young families and young people coming out, and they want to be outside more. And so there's, where the population in these areas were very stagnant, is now growing in the demographics that are good for our golf business. And so we're very hopeful. I mean, you never know what the future is going to bring. I mean, if you
Well,
told
but-
me
but-
what?
So Peter, but that's a great point, and the story you're telling is plausible, but you have experts on now retainer helping you, and the store's report was very useful with respect to the fiscal impact of the residential components, but perhaps if that could also drift into the conversation about the trends of a golf course as well, that might be helpful as well. So we've got half the picture with respect to the residential component. We don't have the other half of the picture with respect to of the crystal ball related issues to the golf course. And your anecdotal comments now are great, but it would be better if it were coming from a source that is, no offense, but a more, defensible source from an expert who can provide some of that information. And you are a qualified expert, there's no doubt about it, but it would be nice if it were more than just Centennial. The trends nationwide or the trends regionally are such that we're going to make a go of it, or doesn't look like we're going to make it past 3 years, and we'll be back to subdivide the property again. That's really what the board's wrestling with right now.
And the-
I don't know how, we're crystal balling something like that. And, all one has to do is take a look at Tiger Woods showing up at the Masters, and, you know, what happens in terms of things of that nature. So
And
perhaps
Rick,
Victoria
that
has
may be-
answers for this, but
The
I...
answer may be, we can't do it, which is a good answer. Now, the board knows what
Right.
we're dealing with. It's all about getting our arms around the questions right now, and that's what we're hearing tonight.
Well,
Sometimes the answer to the questions aren't satisfying, but that's the answer. Them's the facts.
I think, Chris, I think I'd like to see also, I know you have a lot of work to do here with Rich, but you're studying 1996, how relative is that today with traffic, for instance, right? So now we're still gonna have 27 holes, but we're gonna have 63 units. I think you really need to dig into and provide a lot of details on traffic, schools, water, of course, you know, those type of things. The studies that we've seen 26 years ago, I'm not sure how relative they are.
Yeah, we did update it, and in my letter, we showed the approved in '96, and then we showed the same projections for a golf course since the designs changed, and they actually, the modern golf course trip projections is more conservative than in '96, but we showed both data points, along with the new traffic generated by the development.
You should review that with Rich, right, Rich?
Yeah, but I recommend having a traffic consultant on for that, because that's not really my forte, so.
There you go.
That's fine. Yeah, we have the information, we've done it in terms of what is now being proposed, and perhaps you need to have...
It goes back to Pat's point, you know, yeah.
And, you know, verify.
Off the top of my head, I don't.
Well, yeah, but you used ITE and everything else.
Just speak
Yeah.
into the microphones, please, not for us, for the people on television.
Yes, we used ITE. That was the, where we got the data points for how it was done in '96. We compared it, looking at it in today's numbers, and then added
Rick,
on
Chris,
the...
I'm going to interrupt you again, I'm sorry. So no one's disputing the methodology or the conclusions, and I'm using the bad analogy, but we need to see the work. We need to see how you got there. So, for example, many of your responses in the memo, it's a sentence that says nothing's changed. We need to know that, so show us the information that justifies nothing has changed. That's all we're talking about, not disputing that that's the conclusion, that might be the accurate conclusion, but we've got to follow along to see that we're getting there with you. So
Absolutely.
you got to help us get there.
And we did in our first submittal, not in the second one, we had a traffic letter that was a few pages long and did have that data in there. But that's, you know, certainly exactly why we want to have more follow-up meetings and make sure that we address these and that there's no confusion.
Right, so, and that's all great, but I mean, more is better. So if you gave something in the first submittal, it should have been provided in the second submittal. And to Pat's point, that information, everything needs to have, here's '96, here's 2022, you know, here's why it hasn't changed, you know, I mean, that all should be there, not, yeah, as Pat said, not just in a letter, right?
And actually, I'll correct myself, I think that was included in an appendix of the revised EAF, but we could, in that section of the '96 seeker comparison, we could add those data points, we can, so you don't need to find which document it's in.
Right, and that's part of the issue was that there were documents in various locations, it wasn't cohesive, here's traffic, here it is. Or, you know, then now, water, then now, sewer, then now, wetlands, then now, right? So that's what other issues that we were talking about as part of seeker.
Okay. We can do that, and maybe even that seeker comparison. Maybe for now, we can refer as appendices for like water and sewer to the water and sewer report, and when we package it, that'll come
Yeah,
together.
don't refer. What I'd like to see personally is if a document's there, don't refer me back for 40 pages from now. Here's my water and wastewater report, here's everything that's associated with it. Here's the traffic issues, here's everything associated with it. Don't say I gotta look 4 pages or 4 documents over, because then it gets just to be a bit onerous. Probably for you too, but I mean, you're familiar with it, you're knee-deep in it, right? We're looking at it, we're not knee-deep in it.
I got it. I guess I'm just struggling, like our seeker comparison, you wouldn't want the full engineer's report within that document. You'd want the data points summarized, and then you could look in that document for further information.
Yeah, we can meet and discuss exactly what we want. We're
Sure.
getting too deep in the weeds now.
Okay.
Well, I think what, I'm not speaking for Rich, is, yeah, that full report, but with the executive summary attached to it.
Okay,
It has to be there. The backup has to be there.
sure.
I think we discussed Centennial Golf Course amended site plan. You obviously need to do a couple of turns of the crank, and I'm sure you will, work with the team. I think we can move on to what's next on the agenda, which is Centennial Golf Townhomes. I'd like to hear Mike's comments, because Rich's reference is secret, Pat's is the same as the golf course, but I'd like to, at least Mike to read in his comments on agenda item 6, if you don't mind, Mike.
No, they're basically the same as last time, except floor plans, elevations, things of that nature. County Highway Department and Fire Department need to look at the road, the gravel side, I guess, make sure, well, everything, but especially the gravel side, to make sure that that's a safe way for them to get in the event of an emergency or out. Project needs to be referred to the ECB for comments. Can you give me a cross-section all the way through from the road to the wetland, through the middle building on that loop?
Sure.
This way I could see the height of the retaining walls, all the information, because looking at the map, I can't really figure out the height of that retaining wall, and I looked all around, I see the different topo lines, but I just want to, if you could just show me and just say top of wall, bottom of wall, perfect.
Yep.
That would be the height of retaining wall, and that should be it.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
Obviously, more work to do there. And then I'm going to ask Mike one more time to read in your comments on this Centennial Golf Course subdivision lot line adjustment. You had a couple comments there, not many, but I'd like you to go on record with them, please.
Lot line adjustment law only allows for the transfer of 20% or 20,000 square feet of lot area. This submission does not comply. Variance is required from the ZBA. This type of project is not the intent of the lot line adjustment. It was really done, somebody puts a pool in, it's a little too close to the property line, they swap a little bit of land, but they can do it if they get the variance, so that is what they would need to do.
Thank you. And no comments from, same comments for,
And again, that needs to be approved first in the order at the end. It's just because we don't put them in that order on
Yeah.
the agenda. At
there's
that
no
point,
board, there's no board action on any of the items.
Once we vote the lot line, we do the first one.
that's
Yep.
correct.
Okay. Before we wrap up Centennial tonight on the agenda, does anyone from Centennial have any comments or anything you want to discuss, or do you need any clarity on anything? I don't, want to rush anyone out of here. If you have more comments, if you want to clarify anything.
If I may, I thought the board may want to hear from Victoria Stores on the fiscal impact analysis, because that's obviously very important to the board.
Be
So
terrific.
she's here.
Be terrific.
She came all the way from Bethlehem, New York, so.
Well, please.
Thank you. I'm going to leave this right here.
It's fine.
And it was wonderful to hear from Mr. Cleary that the report was useful for this board. Thank you for that. That's certainly something I always want to hear when I'm working with a team like this. Since you have the report, what I'd like to do this evening is highlight some of the information that's, I think, most important, not just to you, but to the people who are listening or watching the broadcast of this meeting. So I want to start by saying Stores Associates is an economic development and development finance consulting firm. I'm the president and founder. We were engaged to conduct a fiscal analysis on the townhome component, and the basic question asked is, will this new development generate enough real property tax revenue to cover the costs, the incremental new costs that residents would add to the town by moving in from outside of the town of Carmel? And that's the basic premise of this report. The conclusion is yes. In fact, with regard to the Carmel Central School District, the surplus of real property tax revenue is estimated to cover an additional 16 students would be paid for by the surplus. And what that means is that I estimated approximately 13 students would be coming in and living in the new community, and 16 above that would also be covered.
That's nice.
So to walk you very briefly through the way the analysis was conducted, and
We are not rushing you. You don't need to be brief. Just give us the details and take
Okay.
time, please.
And certainly, I want to leave time for questions. So the basic analysis begins with how many residents are going to move into the town of Carmel as a result of these units. And the analysis therefore begins with the type of units, the estimated sale price, the size, and the configuration, specifically the first floor master bedrooms, tell a lot about the demographic of the households that are going to find that most appealing and affordable. So from all households, that narrows down the ones most likely to have an income, to afford the price point, and that would be approximately $164,000 of income. This is above the median income for Putnam County and Westchester County. Putnam is about $105,000 a year. So these are middle to upper income households coming in at this price point. What's also in this analysis is that there are fewer homes serving these kinds of households. So there is actually demand for housing at this price point in the town of Carmel and Putnam County that this project is anticipated to fill. Household income, family type, to a certain extent, age. The first floor master bedroom is an important feature for many, many households who don't want to be running up and down the stairs every night. And as I said, new residents mean new to the town. They could be living in Putnam County or Westchester County, but would move into Carmel specifically for this development. The second question asked, once we identify who's likely to come in, is, well, what does it cost to provide services to the residents? And for this study, I used what I would call a pro rata method of assigning cost per household or per resident. So for the school districts, this meant looking at the school district budget per student, estimating the costs per student, and then assigning that. So 13 new students would cost X. Similarly, I looked at the overall town of Carmel budgets over a few years and over households and residents, and assigned a cost per resident. So based on the demographics, the income, and the household size, 60 of the 63 units are anticipated to attract people from outside of the town of Carmel. That would be Putnam County, Westchester County, perhaps a little bit further, who would move into the town, draw services, but also live and work and be residents of the town of Carmel. With an average household size of about 2.77 people, that's 167 new residents. So as I said, when looking at the school budget and the town budget for services, dividing it by all residents, calculating an incremental cost from 167 residents, and identified a surplus of real property taxes after the incremental cost for each of those new residents is covered. The school district pupils per household is a question that I do get asked a lot. And there is something called the Rutgers analysis that's about 15 or more years old now, that takes the entire of New York State and makes estimates. And the more I do this work, the more I realize that it's outdated and also doesn't necessarily fit the unique demographics of a town like Carmel or the Carmel schools. So to estimate the school children, I did look at the Rutgers analysis, and I'm fairly close, a few fewer children because it's more updated. But I was looking at the composition of households likely to move in, the composition of the units, fewer bedrooms, smaller family size, which is where I actually got to 13 new students among the 60 households. So when you look through the report, these are some summary highlights, a little bit of how I got there, the supporting tables, and somewhat more detailed description of that. And I would like to stop here and ask, are there any questions? I know individual people may be particularly interested in one or more data points.
The only question I have, sorry, does the 167 residents compare to what was put in for water and wastewater? Are you using 167 as part of your number when you do your analysis for flows? Not you, but gentleman behind you.
Hi, so that count is using bedrooms, which is based off the DEC's standard for wastewater flow.
So you have X amount of bedrooms. How many bedrooms are there in this, the 60?
63 times 3, 63 units times 3, so
189.
189.
And you're saying, so 167 accounts for 189 bedrooms? How do those two numbers compare, I guess? So that's where the questions go.
I didn't coordinate my assessment of the number of persons per household with the engineering study, and that's actually to the benefit of the water system because there won't be as much demand. A 3-bedroom household at certain income levels is more likely to be a younger growing family and actually have one person per bedroom. As you move into the demographic that is most likely to find this new community within their budget and appealing, the location, the fact that it's single family, but it's not a 4-bedroom colonial on a half-acre lot. It's a different kind of living style. The likelihood that you have 3 or 4 people in that household does diminish based on the configuration. What is more likely is that you have 2 adults, possibly a very small child who isn't demanding the backyard and all of the amenities that we know families still want, no matter how much the newspapers say they don't. Or seniors who are using 2 bedrooms, one is a study and one is a guest room, is a more common configuration and use of the space than having 3 people or 4 people in that unit.
If I may, just, and I believe I mentioned this before, Pattern for Progress, which is a not-for-profit organization that covers 9 counties in the lower Hudson Valley, and I'm familiar with it because I was the corporate secretary and I'm on the executive board. They did an analysis called Out of Alignment, and it was published within the last 6 months. I can give you the website. You can just Google Pattern for Progress. The title of it was Out of Alignment. And what that study demonstrated was the following, that with respect to the counties, and they did the breakdown by county, in Putnam County, the mean age of the residents is projected to increase dramatically. It's going to be a lot of people my age. And a lot of people are downsizing their homes, and they are looking for housing like this. And so not only is that the trend in terms of what's going to happen here, and this is a very detailed analysis that was done. I think some of the money came from the Ford Foundation, as I recall, and we also, from Central Hudson and Gas, did some contributions towards this report as well. The other interesting thing was that the dramatic change in enrollment that is projected, not only for Putnam County, but this whole region. I mean, I'm sure that there's been a dramatic change here in the town of Carmel School District. I know there has been Pauling and Brewster, and where I have this.
Significantly down, yeah.
Yeah, and so, you know, when you do the comparative economic analysis, what we're seeing is that the master bedroom on the first floor, big deal for older people. Secondly, that people that are older don't want to have the maintenance of a lawn and all of that kind of stuff. And the other thing that, from my perspective as a golfer and someone who's kind of old, I like the fact that I can wake up in the morning, I can go across the parking lot, I can get breakfast, I can get lunch. I mean, you know, there's a certain amenity package there that's very attractive to, you know, perhaps an older cohort. So, but for what it's worth, I think I respectfully would refer you to Pattern for Progress. It's called Out of Alignment. You may want to take a look at it, and I think you're going to find it's rather startling what's happening in terms of the demographics in this area. So,
When was that study done? Just like this.
I'm sorry?
When was that study done?
When was it done? I would say it was published within the last 12, 15 months. So it's not aged data. It's pretty recent.
No, I'm just curious.
Yeah, no, it's pretty recent.
Okay.
So part of the fiscal analysis, you mentioned a surplus of 16 students, I believe. I don't know what numbers you use. What does that equate to dollar-wise? I mean, like,
Pardon me for a minute while I
take your time.
flip some pages and get to the exact number.
And Rick, while we're doing that, can we get a breakdown again of the, I don't know, the gentleman is from Toll Brothers, but can we get a breakdown again, just to refresh our memory of 63 units, how many 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom, 4-bedroom, what the makeup of them are? Do you know yet? Well, you gotta come to the microphone. Just to refresh. Sorry. I didn't catch that.
Kevney Moses, representative from Toll Brothers. Thank you for having us tonight and for your comments. Regarding that information, that's something we're still working through. To date, I believe that what was presented to you thus far is accurate.
All 3-bedroom?
I believe so, but I would just ask that that be open for confirmation, and I'm
Sure.
happy to provide that information next
And
week.
Square footage roughly, again, do you?
You know, somewhere in the, 2,500 to 3,000 range.
That's nice. Okay, any questions on the makeup of what we have, the gentleman from Toll Brothers?
I mean, there'll be plenty of time.
Yeah, I was just,
There's gonna be a
I
lot
was
of
filling
questions.
some time for you to do your
A little
research
early.
there.
I appreciate that. Did you all take the opportunity to go to page 9 of the Stores Associates report? It's okay. In Table 4B, I show $25,063 is tax levy per student for the 21-22 school year.
Okay,
Times 16.
yeah, times 16, okay, thank you. Any, Pat, do you have any questions for everybody?
No, I think as we move forward, there are refinements to the study that you just heard. For example, just that number, is that all costs or just the educational cost or the fixed cost? So there's
Yeah.
lots of questions that we would ask that need to be clarified
Yeah, we have
moving
plenty of
forward. But
time,
it's not, you
Yeah.
don't have to answer it now.
Yeah, I can answer one very briefly and then provide details. Because it's the tax levy, it's the costs that are borne regionally, that are borne within the town.
Right, but that doesn't reflect, for example, the incremental cost per kid, for example. So fixed costs remain fixed. There's an incremental cost per kid that would, and by the way, relevant in a lot of different places. In our school district where the enrollments are decreasing, the more the merrier.
Yeah.
It's really not an issue.
Yes, yeah.
Yep. Well, I do hear that in districts where enrollments are declining. Because this analysis was done on a pro rata basis, and I will provide further details, what that means is I'm not differentiating between the capital costs, which must be paid regardless of whether you have 13 new students. The actual incremental cost to the school for adding 13 students is the educational cost in terms of maybe half a teacher, part of a guidance counselor, a portion of a coach. And so that would actually be substantially less than 25,000. That number requires more analysis to get to, and we can work on that.
I was just, and you explained where you came up with your calculation of 13 students. I was surprised. I found it, I thought to be a little low. But to your point too, you know, the demographic of who could be buying based on the layout. With that being said though, and I agree with you, I mean, and I've often said we need this kind of development in the town, but I still think that may be a little low.
And the one other piece of data that's often used is go look at other similar projects and see what's actually generated from similar projects. So that's another bit of information that can be provided for you.
Thank you. That's not generally publicly available, but that type of data is terrific to deepen this analysis. I would leave you then with page 6. I presented more general information about the housing stock in the town of Carmel.
Sorry,
Yeah.
just want to make it, that the information may not be generally publicly available, but Toll Brothers might have that information for you because they do this. This is their business, so.
We'll certainly have a talk. But as I was saying, on page 6, I provide information about the housing stock within the town of Carmel, Putnam County, and Westchester County. And about 54% is, for the town, is within the 300 to 500,000. This is most likely your 3 and 4 bedroom, your predominantly single-family homes. So when you talk about a household that has children who are school age and they're bigger and they need more space or public open space around them, that's still most likely the type of housing demanded. So that's, nothing about this project changes the overall demand for housing in the town of Carmel. It adds to your stock for a type of housing that is actually not readily available at this time, but the demand is growing, which is I don't have to mow the lawn and I don't have to walk up the stairs, but I've got great quality of life.
That was very helpful, thank you. Okay, if there's no other comments, I think we left you with a couple to-dos that you can work on with this. And
Absolutely, yeah.
this is new to us, right, going from the 18, adding this in, and I think we need to have this meeting. It's good.
Thank you for your time. Thank
Good
you.
session, thank you.
very much, and we'll set up a meeting.
Thanks for that financial review too, by the way, that was helpful. Thank you. Okay, Rose distributed minutes of February 10th, February 23rd, and March 10th. Did anyone get a chance to review them? If so, do we have a motion to approve them?
I didn't, because Bob
Yeah.
usually handles it, so.
I did read them, and Bob did comment on them. He provided
Okay.
comments to
He did, yeah.
Rose. So with that being said, I think we can offer them up. I'll make a motion to offer the meeting minutes.
A second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And make a motion to adjourn the meeting?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
You have to, you're Mr. Vice. You have to second.